Welcome, and today we are so pleased to have on set for our first edition of the Writer's Block, which is our new segment about writers and what they write, Marianne Leone. Marianne is a Kingston resident. She is an actress, she is a writer, she is an activist, she is a blogger, she is a woman of many talents. Welcome, Marianne Leone. We're so happy to have you here.
I'm very happy to be here. Although you exaggerate when you say blogger, because I really don't get around to it as much as I should. Because when you write, it's very hard to blog. But
okay. Well, you've done some, because I've read them, and they're great. We're going to talk today, and about your acting. In case she looks familiar, you were on Sopranos.
I was,
for
but
4
I was
seasons.
a brunette then.
And you played?
Joanne Moltisanti, who was Christopher's mother.
Christopher's mother we have on set. But today we're going to talk about her book, Ma Speaks Up, and a first-generation daughter talks back, and it's all about your mother and your upbringing.
I love that talk back, because that was what I said every week in confession. I talk back to my mother. So,
Therefore the name.
Yes.
What I found fascinating about this book, and I read this book, is it's a bunch of chapters, and the chapters actually can stand alone by themselves. Some of the titles of the chapters are just a riot. The Official Story, Ma Speaks Up, Holiday Shores, Ma's Rules for the Church, Nice Like a Prostitute. Now, can you just explain the nice like a prostitute?
You know, my mother was, and this is interesting, most mothers are holding their daughters back today from, dressing and bearing their bellies or whatever. My mother was horrified because I wore sloppy black tops and jeans that trailed in the dirt, and I wore big, huge, voluminous flax sundresses, and she was just, what is wrong with you? Why aren't you showing what you have? So one day I actually, she was babysitting our child. She was always worried that my husband would just give up because the flax sundresses. So one day I wore a form-fitting dress, and she babysat, and she said to me very approvingly, "You're looking nice, like a prostitute." And I didn't know how to take it. I thought, does she know what that word means? Or maybe she does.
Yeah. But she was a voluptuous dresser herself.
She was, and
yes.
she
played
had
to
class,
her.
but she really she played to her charms.
To her charms and what she
Yes.
had. So the book tells really about her life and then your relationship with her all growing up.
Yes.
Which any daughter can relate to, who has had a mother.
Yes.
What I find so striking about you is how you write. Like, if I may quote from one of the chapters called Ma Speaks Up. You said, Ma had only one weapon in her quiver. It was silence. My mother, aggrieved, collapsed star silence, held untold reserves of galaxies in its dark and limitless heart. This deep space silence could go on for days, pinging bursts of pain back and forth between us, like gamma rays, leftover energy from the Big Bang argument that started it all in the first place.
Thank you for picking that paragraph, and I will tell you something. Andre Dubus, who is a writer I admire very much because he wrote House of Sand and Fog, he wrote Townie, he's a wonderful writer and a generous writer, was a first reader of this, and that's the paragraph that he read back
out?
To me and said,
that's
this
so funny.
paragraph, Marianne. So,
but it's so true, because
so
that's
cool.
how, when mothers give you silence, when your parents give you the silent treatment, that's the worst. Yell at me, scream at me.
Truly.
And your mother did that.
Oh, she was an expert at it.
Yeah.
She was really good.
Another thing when you talked about your brother. Now tell a little bit about the Peanut.
Well, my brother was, the principe, because he was the Italian boy in the family and the first boy. And I didn't realize it at the time because I was only not that much older than him. And he was like about 2.5 and I was 5.5. And I think I was unconsciously trying to kill him. So over and over again. So the adults were in the other room and there was a bowl of peanuts, and I showed him how I tossed them in the air and caught them in my mouth, and then he caught one in his lung and turned blue. So it was almost as if my 5-year-old wish came true, and then I was horrified and terrified. So
that you had hurt him.
Yeah.
And the way you put it is, before his arrival, speaking about your brother, I had been the storied, long-awaited first child, but the golden era of me lasted only 3 years. I had been usurped by my brother's arrival, my crown snatched, my princess reign curtailed. I no longer basked in the beam of my father's sun. My mother, too, had receded, bedazzled, drunk on my brother's beauty, his curls, his happy baby chortles.
It's true.
And any older sibling feels that way about when the young one comes along.
And not only that, he was beautiful. He was physically beautiful, and he had a great personality. He was happy. I was kind of a maudlin child and kind of the ghost child you see in the background, and everyone delighted in him.
He was a happy little soul.
Yes,
yeah. But the way you describe these people in your lives and the situations in your lives is just, it's so funny. And yet it's so heart-wrenching because anybody can relate to it.
Oh, I'm really happy to hear that.
Yeah,
because it's a specific situation, but I was hoping it would be universal, too.
Oh, it absolutely is. Another thing is your mother, who had always been a stay-at-home mom, and your dad owned
He owned a working man's bar. He owned the kind of bar that had the TV up in the corner. Guys slid into booths wearing fedoras, and it was that kind of a bar. But my mother cooked for the bar. Right. So today it would be a place that foodies would discover and say, "Oh my God, have you tried Leone's Cafe?" Because they have.
Yeah, right.
Because she was hand delivering this food that she was cooking.
And this was in Newton. You grew up in Newton,
right,
in a place called The Lake.
The
Lake.
Though
there was no lake.
Right. It's Nonantum, and everybody, actually it's becoming gentrified now, which is a shame. But at the time, everyone was from one village in Italy. They were all from San Donato Val di Comino.
Wow.
And so it was Italians, Irish, and a smattering of French Canadians, basically.
Wow, and that was your entire neighborhood.
That was my world. And actually, they still paint the colors of the Italian flag down the Adams Street, which is right in front of where my dad's bar was, and they still carry the La Madonna del Carmine.
So that tradition stayed.
Yeah, they've got it. It's like the Bronx, places in the Bronx or Brooklyn that still do that. Yeah.
And your dad unfortunately died
He died very young. He died at 50,
And then left your mom?
My mom was widowed at 43.
Yeah, that's young.
You know, this is where your empathy comes in later, and you realize at the time I was like this horrible 15-year-old who was just like, ugh, what's wrong with her? But, you know, later you realize she was 43, had 3 kids, English is a second language, and no marketable skills outside of cooking.
Right.
I mean, that's a tough place to be in.
And so in your 15-year-old brain, your mom went to work as the lunch lady.
Yeah.
And if I may quote you, Ma stood in a line of old women ladling inedible glop onto beige melamine plates and shoving them forward to the sluggish teenagers awaiting them. She was unrecognizable, an impersonator of my mother.
Yeah.
And that's how you felt.
Well, it broke my heart also. I mean, even the maligning of the food that she was serving compared to the food that she was capable of producing. It was a blasphemy to me. It was a blasphemy upon a blasphemy.
Right.
It was,
And you talked a lot about your mother and religion, because religion is very important in your family.
Well, it was interesting.
But not to mom as much.
No, my mother was an anti-cleric, and the Italians have a word for it. It's called mangiapreti, which literally means priest eater. And, so she just, she had a very cynical outlook about Italians they actually have a pasta called strozzapreti, priest stranglers. And I think it's
a love-hate.
Well, I think it's like when you're a peasant and you barely have enough to eat, and my father grew up hungry. Yeah. Those guys eat, you know what I mean? Yep. So, I mean, I think it was the awareness that there was a little bit of a difference between, they were educated, and there was that resentment of, you want the priest to read a letter from America, bring him a dozen eggs, that kind of thing.
Right.
So my mother never lost that.
No.
Even though they sent me to Catholic school, because they had this immigrant thing about, well, how good can public school be? It's free. You have to pay for this, so it must be better. But then they send me to this place where I buy everything the nuns are telling me. Yeah. And now I'm worried because my mother's not going to mass.
Right.
And I'm literally
what's going to happen to
her? But I'm conflicted because she's making this fabulous macaroni every Sunday. She's rolling out this hand-cut pasta that I have never been able to duplicate.
Yeah.
Because
you're right
it's
about
so
that.
thin.
Yeah.
And the whole time I'm saying, you never go to church.
Yeah.
She's saying, no, mother's not have to go to church. Mother's going to make the macaroni. And I'm thinking, but you never even go to confession. Hey, I got to tell my sins to some guy. I'm like, it's not a guy. It's a priest. She's like, go. But at the same time, I'm thinking, yeah, but I really want the pasta.
Right. Oh, Ma, she was awesome.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, we only have about a minute left of this interview, and we're going to have you back for another one. as a mother, you were a mother. You will
Right.
always be a mother. And
Right.
your son, Jesse,
Right.
tell us a little bit about, this was your first book.
Right,
Jesse, a Mother's Story.
Jesse was born premature, and he was born at 30 weeks. And third day of his life, he had a massive cerebral hemorrhage, which meant that he had cerebral palsy. He was nonverbal, and but he was also brilliant. He was a Latin scholar. He was a poet. I wanted to celebrate his life,
Yeah.
and I wrote this book in his memory. We moved here because of Jesse, because Massachusetts at the time had better than average inclusion, and it's still a very smart state. I'm very happy to be here. You know. So
Jesse would be so proud.
yeah, I would be so proud of him.
And Mom too. Mom too, the generations.
I'd love to.
Yeah.
I would love to know what Mom would think of this,
Yeah,
but I think she
right
would
now.
like it.
Well, we'll have you back again to talk about writing in general, because you do a beautiful job writing all kinds of articles on very timely and very important subjects.
I want to say that this book is like a collection of essays, and I do think essays are something that reflect the zeitgeist of today when people are so busy and are so distracted. The good thing about this book, I think, is you're able to pick it up at any place.
Absolutely,
and read
chapter
it.
by chapter,
Yeah.
and they kind of are standalones.
Right.
Yeah, if you read
Right.
them up. Well, thank you.
Thank
We
you,
loved
Julie.
having you,
It was
and we'll
lovely
have you
being
back
here.
for Writer's Block,
Thank
Part
you.
2. Okay.
Thanks.